afternoon on this Wednesday, December 4th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Senior Hezbollah commander Hassan Halulakis is killed outside his home in Beirut. Nasrallah comments. The army struggles to put an end to violence in Tripoli amid clashes between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And the Syrian government reiterates that Bashar al-Assad will remain president and lead any transition agreed upon in the Geneva peace talks. Hezbollah announced that one of its commanders was killed outside his house in Beirut, and an Israeli official has denied accusations of being behind the assassination. Around midnight on Tuesday, one of the commanders of the resistance, Hassan al-Lakis, was assassinated in front of his house in the St. Therese district of Hadath as he returned from work. A statement released by the group blamed Israel without giving any details on the operation. The Lebanese security official said the assailants opened fire on al-Lakis with an assault rifle while he was in his car parked at the residential building where he lived, some 3 kilometers southwest of the capital. The statement described al-Lakis, who was in his 40s, of spending all his life and youth in the noble resistance, adding that he was targeted by Israel again and again and in many different places. The army is struggling to put an end to violence in Tripoli as intermittent fighting persists on the 4th day of clashes between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad after it was authorized by the government to take charge of Lebanon's second city. The army patrolled the Tripoli streets and front lines, conducting raids and clashing with gunmen. Soldiers set up checkpoints near At-Taqwa Mosque and Noor Square, but no intensified army presence could be seen in the city. Some residents of Tripoli said that they did not believe the army's plan would bring security back to their city. Army Commander General Jean Ahouaje said the military would be strict in dealing with gunmen in the city, regardless of their political affiliation. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri reiterated his call for an arms-free Tripoli, while caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati said that the army enjoyed political support from all parties to accomplish its mission. President Michel Sleiman slams the criticism directed against Saudi Arabia by some officials in Lebanon, rejecting any meddling in the affairs of other countries. He made his remarks during the opening at a conference held in Jbeil. The president declared that Lebanon's historic ties with Saudi Arabia should not be ruined through these accusations, in reference to statements made by Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and other March 8 camp officials. Sleiman therefore demanded that the purpose of arms in Lebanon and the meaning of martyrdom be defined. He also stressed the importance of honest dialogue in Lebanon that would help assert Lebanon's sovereignty and its ties with other nations. The Council of Maronite Bishops warned against turning Lebanon into the captive of international policies, saying the political paralysis was leading to the state's disintegration. Maronite Patriarch Shaddai said some parties abroad have dealt with Lebanon as if it is not a sovereign state. The statement said the situation of the government and the political standstill began to paralyze the public sector, leading to corruption. It added that such corruption was affecting the division of power between Christians and Muslims. The bishops urged politicians to adopt a new electoral law and form a new cabinet to prepare for the presidential elections next year. The bishops warned of vacuum, saying it would lead to the nation's disintegration. They also expressed concern over the security situation and lauded the efforts exerted by the army and all security forces to impose security in Tripoli and prevent chaos from further spreading. A government's minister in Syria is insisting that Bashar al-Assad will remain president and lead any transition agreed upon in the Geneva peace talks planned for next month. Information Minister Omran al-Sohbi said in remarks that his government was not going to Geneva to hand the keys to Damascus over to the opposition. The dispute over Assad's role in the transition has cast doubt over whether the two sides will ever reach an agreement. The National Coalition has demanded the creation of a transitional governing body with full executive powers that excludes Assad and his inner circle. In other comments, Zuhbi said that Saudi Arabia, a strong backer of the rebels, should be excluded from the peace conference, while the rebels insist that Iran should be barred. The two sides are set to meet in Geneva on January 22 in talks mediated by the UN Arab League envoy Lakhdar Brahimi. Coming up next, a $1 million Picasso, yours for just $135? We'll be back with the answer. Welcome back. Iran is to hold new talks with major powers on its nuclear program next week in the wake of a landmark interim deal reached last month. The talks will be joined by representatives of the UN nuclear watchdog, which is charged with overseeing implementation of the deal under which Iran agreed to roll back parts of its program in return for limited relief from Western sanctions. The expert-level talks between Iran and the P5+1 will be held in Vienna on December 9th and 10th with the aim of paving the way to implement the joint plan of action. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is currently visiting the United Arab Emirates after having met this morning with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in Tehran. Zarif has since Sunday been on a tour of Kuwait, Oman and Qatar, trying to persuade the Gulf states that the nuclear deal will enhance regional stability. Ukraine's embattled Prime Minister Mykola Azarov is warning protesters they will be punished if they break the law as he holds a cabinet meeting with his ministers despite an attempted blockade. With a crisis over the government's rejection of closer ties with the European Union, tension stayed high in Kiev as black-helmeted riot police sealed off the approach road to the main offices of President Viktor Yanukovych. Azarov's government survived an attempt to topple it in parliament yesterday in a rough encounter with opposition parties. Hundreds of protesters rallied this morning near official buildings but found many routes blocked by vehicles which Interior Ministry forces had stationed across streets and approach roads. Trying to defuse protesters, the government has defended its policy move by saying that it is only a pause in the moves to integrate further with Europe rather than an all-out turn. U.S. Senator John McCain is in Libya and says the United States is ready to provide aid, including medical assistance for those wounded in the North African country's 2011 upheaval. He made the remarks after meeting Libyan Parliament President Nouri Abdul Hasmain, during which the senator also expressed satisfaction with the political reconstruction of Libya.
I'm very pleased to be back as we watch the long and difficult path to democracy. A lot of progress has been made, but we would all acknowledge that there's a great deal more progress, and that can only be achieved through the cooperation and assistance of the United States and other friends in Europe and in the region. The plans for training and equipping the military to bring them up to the capabilities of restoring order throughout the country. The progress has been slow, but part of that is due to the stability of the situation in Benghazi. I'm grateful that the Prime Minister and others in the government have pledged for their full and complete cooperation. They view this murder as seriously as the American people.
An opinion poll shows that Turkey's popularity in the Middle East has dropped sharply over the past 2 years, reflecting Ankara's sometimes controversial foreign policy strategy. The biggest decline was registered in Egypt and war-ravaged Syria, where Turkey is strongly opposed to those in power. Turkey has adopted a zero-problems policy towards its neighbors, but has found itself losing influence in the wake of the Syrian civil war and the Arab Spring uprisings. In Syria, 88% of those surveyed believe that Turkey is not friendly towards their country, which has been in the grip of a brutal conflict since March of 2011. The Islamic-rooted government of Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan supports the rebels fighting President Bashar al-Assad and hosts about 600,000 refugees from the war. The political crisis that has shaken Thailand's capital for more than a week suddenly eased after the Prime Minister ordered police to stop battling anti-government protesters. The move was timed to coincide with celebrations of the King's birthday later this week, a holiday that holds deep significance in the Southeast Asian nation. In a sharp reversal in strategy, riot police lowered their shields and walked away from heavily fortified positions around Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatра's office at the government house. The government move was widely seen as offering demonstrators a face-saving way out, and the government expressed hope it will defuse a conflict that has killed 4 people and wounded more than 256 in the last 3 days alone. Protest leader Suthap Sakusban, however, vowed to keep up what has become The UN Atomic Watchdog says thieves in Mexico have stolen a truck containing a potentially extremely dangerous radioactive material used in medical treatment. The truck was on its way to a radioactive waste storage center when it was stolen in the city of Tipojaco near Mexico City. The IAEA said it was informed about the December 2 theft by Mexico's CNS Nuclear Security Authority. The Mexican authorities are currently conducting a search for the source and have issued a press release to alert the public. The material could not be used in a conventional nuclear weapon, but could in theory be put in a so-called dirty bomb, an explosive device spreading the radioactive material over a wide area. Experts have long warned about the danger posed by the large amounts of such material under insufficient security. And U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping meet for the first time since China's declaration of a new air defense zone above disrupted islands in the East China Sea has pitted the U.S. and China against each other. Despite Washington's preference not to get involved in a territorial spat, concerns that China's action could portend a broader effort to assert its dominance has drawn in the U.S. To that end, Biden said he would raise those concerns with China's leaders, meeting with Chinese Vice President Li Yuanchao in Beijing. He also said that the U.S. and China must expand practical cooperation and deliver results, adding he was impressed with Xi's commitment to managing differences, as he is set to meet with the Chinese president later in the evening. The new round of tensions with China comes as the U.S. strives to increase its own engagement, influence, and military presence in Asia, in part as a hedge against China's growing partner. And still stumped for a Christmas present? What about an exquisite $1 million Picasso painting that you could have for just $135? Well, at an online charity raffle, the perfectly preserved Cubist gouache was bought by an anonymous donor from a New York gallery and given to the charity working to save the ancient city of Saida in southern Lebanon. The UNESCO-registered charity has issued 50,000 tickets at about €100. That's $135 each for the first of its kind tombola on December 18 at Sotheby's in Paris, hoping to raise $5 million. It wants the money to develop a traditional handicraft village, giving young people, women, and the disabled jobs in Saida, and to set up an institute for Phoenician studies in Beirut. Hopefuls have snapped up 40,000 tickets already, and Oliver Picasso, Pablo's grandson, is in New York to drum up interest in the remaining 10,000. Olivier, who says he has many Picassos of his own, described the signed L'Homme au Gibus, or Man in the Opera Hat, painted in 1914, as a masterpiece of museum standard in perfect condition. Those marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. Senior Hezbollah commander Hassan Haloulaki's is killed outside his home in Beirut. The army struggles to put an end to violence in Tripoli amid clashes between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And the Syrian government reiterates that Bashar al-Assad will remain president and lead any transition agreed upon in the Geneva peace talks. Those are your Wednesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal. Make sure to catch Linda Tamim tomorrow at 4:20 for all the latest in Lebanon and the world. Have a good one.